Ladies, gentlemen, and dragons of all ages, as you progress through the Veilguard, maybe you'll find some moments to knock you right back to your last save, a particular boss or enemy that tries to show you that they really do mean business. And while I wouldn't call the game hard generally in most instances, there are always ways to make it even easier, or even just to live out a wild power fantasies. That's honestly half of the reason to play this style of game, in my opinion. Back right around after the game launched, we talked about my recommended starter builds for each class up to around level 20 so you can unlock your specialization. Today we're going to be bringing it up a notch, making some changes and adjustments, and now we're going to be talking about your proper mid-game build, specifically right around level 30. You will have more than 30 skill points at this stage because of the Fen'Harel altars that you've hopefully been interacting with as you progress the game, but level 30 is the specific requirement to invest in one of those main trees in your specialization, so it's when builds open up a little bit more as a result. So today let's talk about one build for each class that will absolutely demolish once you hit level 30, able to turn enemies that are intended to be tough fights or even bosses into essentially paste with minimal danger. And of course with the note that if you are level 20 or below, you probably want to use one of our starter builds instead, as this has adjustments specifically made for the number of skill points you're expected to have. First up then, as usual, we will start with the Warrior. Specifically today we'll be diving fully into the Reaper specialization, both because it is my personal favorite of the specializations for Warrior, but largely also for the specific boost that it offers. This is the Warrior specialization that focuses on using your shield as a projectile attack for the majority of your non-ability offense, and then it weaves in skills to add in a ton of affliction stacks on enemies to make them slowly tick through damage over time effects, all while having lifesteal to heal itself back up from injuries through quite substantial use of the Siphon affliction. The general result of this is that you can become just unbelievably tanky as long as your abilities are actually hitting enemies to apply these afflictions. You have the safety of being able to apply most of your weapon damage from ranged, which is pretty unusual for Warrior in pretty much every other playstyle, and then you have absolutely massive hits from your abilities themselves to do the rest of the job for you. For your faction choice, obviously at this stage you're already pretty much set, but if starting a new character for this build with this build in mind, I'd recommend Mournwatch for the extra maximum stack to all afflictions, as we stack multiple types of different afflictions. Diving into the skill tree then, I'll only really be stopping to talk about the more important passives or abilities just for the sake of brevity, but you can obviously see each node along the path. Starting off then, we pick up Shield Volley. This is a main part of our non-ability offense, charging up a shield toss, then use Shield Volley to basically get 3 bonus hits of the charged shield damage. This generally will extend out long enough as well for the shield toss cooldown to reset too. We then take Focused Retaliation for the precision buff after Perfect Defense, then Titan Stomp, which is a great cooldown based ability for us to use early, but it does get replaced a bit later on within our setup. We take Improved Throw for 10% bonus shield toss damage, Return to Sender for our Perfect Defense reflects against ranged attacks, Staggering Toss for bonus stagger on shield toss depending on how much rage you have, and then Desolate Malady, which increases all affliction damage. We grab Eclectic Armor for a number of different shield toss base boost if you have armor and helmet of a different type, so you want to make a point of never having matching armor type. We then take Ignition for flaming weapons after a weak point kill, Ricochet Shot for an extra shield toss bounce, and then Bloody Advance for a high damage projectile duration skill that applies bleed, and also Necrosis once we take Lingering Decay, which makes duration abilities apply Necrosis on hit, so Bloody Advance just applies a bunch of stacks of both. We then grab Mortal Wounds into Seething Pitch for bonus rage generation from our shield toss hits, then Death's Blessing for bonus necrotic damage, into Deadly Ground, our third ability. This is an area duration ability. It makes a circle around you that deals damage and applies necrosis thanks to our earlier passive, and it also gives you bonus damage while you are standing in the circle. We then pick up Critical Power for enhanced damage, activating on critical hit kills, and then Salt in the Wound. This makes all duration abilities increase all active afflictions by 1 stack when they deal damage. The main use of this is that it makes Deadly Ground pulses manage your affliction stacks for you while you build up your rage through other methods then use on other abilities. Essentially, Deadly Ground and Bloody Advance are both rage spending abilities, but because they are both also duration abilities, you only can cast them again once their initial effect is over. So as long as you have enough rage generation, you can keep both of these active permanently, and if you have enough rage generation, as we will, then you can add in a third spender here too as well. We then pick up an Insidious Rot for 1 bonus maximum necrosis stack, Enduring Rage, which lets you keep 50 rage even between combat, allowing us to be in fights with rage already built up a bit, and then Depth of Fury for 50 bonus maximum rage. It's around this time that you should be hitting level 20 depending on Fen'Harel Harel altars, so we go over and unlock Master Throw for an extra shield toss charge level. Then into the Reaper specialization itself. We grab the ultimate, which is just awesome visually and very powerful too. Then we pick up Reaper as an ability. This is our 100 cost rage ability, but it also is a duration ability, so we are essentially juggling 3 different durations. That said, this one is extra important as it applies the Siphon debuff, which gives you lifesteal while it's active and creates an interesting essential priority order between the abilities. If you are injured, you want to use Reaper always as your next cast. If the enemy has no affliction stacks built up, you want to use Bloody Advance to load them up. If you are healthy and the enemy already has afflictions, then you use Deadly Ground. Aside from that, you will eventually hit a point of rage generation where this just isn't much of a concern anymore, though I should mention that for the free cast ability from Companion Time Slow, you almost always want to use Reaper as it is our only 100 cost ability. We pick up Death's Blessing for bonus necrotic damage, Reckless Shot to make projectile abilities deal damage at the cost of taking some health on use, and then we grab Devastation for both bonus affliction damage and duration, and then Death's Touch. This makes any charged attack supply necrosis if a duration ability is active. At this point, you are probably just a bit before reaching level 30, so we grab a few more points in the main web. Shot Chaser makes projectile abilities deal bonus damage relative to possible shield toss bounces, so this boosts Bloody Advance a fair amount in this build where we're focusing around our shield tosses too. We then grab Necessary Steps to let us take Double Shot for a bonus projectile fired off alongside any projectile ability used too, and if you had one more point than I do here, then you would take Staying Power as well for a total of 15% less damage taken while all of our abilities are cycling through, because it's 5% less damage taken per active duration ability. Then from here we grab Perfect Throw for a timed bonus damage effect if you release Shield Toss just as you reach a new charge level, boosting our range damage potential quite a lot. We take Shattering Throw for bonus Shield Toss damage and 1 bonus bounce as well. Then we take Spirit of Hunger, which fires a necrotic projectile whenever you kill an enemy, and Let It Linger for bonus damage and afflictions applied based on shield damage type, which at this stage should be physical, so you apply bleed stacks with shield toss as well. I should mention here that if you want to go purely tankier, the right side tree here is technically better for that, so you can choose to go that way for more lifesteal and less range damage, but I find shield toss to be immensely powerful if you get the reflex off with a perfect charge toss, so I prefer left side here personally. Moving on then from that, we have equipment, and generally speaking, you just want any equipment that boosts duration abilities, boost ranged or weak point damage, charge shield throw damage, or boost necrotic damage or afflictions in any real way. Your general playstyle should be essentially just juggling time slow from each of your companions, as you can build this to give you free ability casts and then bonus rage upon ending. You want to use 2 time slow companions together, especially in this build, and then you can manage this around so that you always use your 100 rage cost ability as the free cast during the time slow, then you can fill the gaps in between with just general attacks to gain extra rage. Deadly Ground you can keep pretty much permanently active through this, and then you pretty much just want to alternate between the other two while using charged shield toss and reflecting the shield back out as your main source of damage between abilities. Then second up today we have the Mage, and this is a direct sort of continuation of our starter build, and it just gets absolutely nasty with the damage very quickly. Basically the focus of this is to keep 100% uptime on Tempest as an ability, which is a super high damage lightning duration ability that applies shock with each hit. We have a node in our Spellblade specialization that makes enemies gain burning whenever they gain shock as well, so each strike of this applies both of these afflictions at the same time. We put a lot of power into afflictions as a concept and into bonus maximum stacks, and so even by themselves these afflictions do a lot of damage, and it's mostly for that reason, for pure power purposes, I would recommend using the Mourn Watch faction to give you 1 bonus maximum of each affliction stacks, as this adds up quite a lot in this sort of build. We then build around the Dagger and Orb weapon combo. We gain fun combos that let us build and expend our arcane bombs without having to stop between attacks and accomplishing it from ranged as well through combos. We then get a secondary way to apply the Burning Affliction, which turns into more shock stacks as well as a result, and then we have our actual specialization ability, Void Blade. This does a ton of damage. It hits twice, we reduce its mana cost down to 50, which makes it extremely effective, and then basically the whole goal is to keep Tempest up at permanent uptime, use Firewall on cooldown, and then any excess mana that you generate can go into Void Blade, on top of which you deal guaranteed critical hits when your strike abilities hit knockdown enemies, and Tempest knocks down smaller enemies very naturally, so we scale crit and lightning damage together very well. That said, let's go down into the skill tree itself. We grab Fade Strike into Quick Recovery. This gives us less delay on mana regen after we spend it or if we're hit by an enemy. This lets us then take also Chain Lightning as an ability, which is an effective early game spell that we replace very quickly. We go through Fade Conduit for bonus mana to perfect cast, through to Wrath for bonus critical damage, and also Precision Strikes, which causes all strike abilities to be crits against knockdown enemies. We grab Reclamation for mana management, Amperage for bonus electric damage in general, and then Tempest, which is generally our main important spell that we prioritize here. Again, our main goal is to keep this spell at 100% uptime. It is a duration ability, which means you can only cast it again once the duration is ended, so the idea is that we build at least 100 mana over its duration so that we can cast it again, with any excess going into Void Blade. We grab Traumatize to let us go over to Nexus Shock, which turns our more single target shock applications, like through Tempest, into larger area of effect pops that do damage to multiple nearby enemies. We grab Conductor for more damage with strike abilities per stack of shock on an enemy. Then we grab Shock Mastery for 1 bonus maximum shock stacks. We then go back towards the top in the beginning to grab Wall of Fire for a cooldown based ability that applies burning stacks and also does fire damage. This enables some other synergy later on, and because it's cooldown ability, it does not compete for our mana spending needs, which is a focus on Tempest uptime, and then the Void Blades later on as a high damage bonus. And then after this, we head through Debilitating Shocks for some survivability, through to Shellbreaker, mostly just as a gateway to Storm Surge. This is another cooldown ability, useful earlier game, and I'd recommend it until you get your specialization. But we still keep these skill points in here even afterwards, because it lets us take Baleful Blast over here, which forces all blast abilities to be critical hits against low health enemies, which is anything under 30%. We then grab Elemental Catalyst for bonus damage to abilities that match your orb or staff type, and ideally you would have a lightning orb and a lightning staff to boost both of our main abilities and damage type by this fair amount. At this point, you should be around level 20, so let's grab Spellblade as a specialization. We get the Spellblade Ultimate, which is pretty awesome in action, and then we pick up Void Blade, replacing Storm Surge on your ability bar and giving us a high damage mana dump. We then grab Finale into Blast Efficiency. This makes blast abilities cost 50 less mana, and our only blast ability is Void Blade, but this makes it extremely efficient to use for only 50 mana cost total each time. After this, we pick up Deterioration for 15% bonus penetration, and that means that you ignore a percentage of an enemy's defense. Then we pick up Arcane Strike. This makes all strike abilities also proc your Arcane Bombs, which is a nice little bonus to our 2 main sources of damage anyways. From here, we grab some skill points in other places, assuming you have some bonuses from Fen Harel Altars and aren't level 30 yet. We pick up Concentration into Energy Burst, which essentially exists for us to make our full duration of Tempest do bonus damage if we cast it directly after our Firewall. And if you can sneak in any Void Blades during the 10-second window there too, they will get boosted as well. We then also pick up Degrade over on the left here for 5% bonus damage per primer and affliction on the target. This mostly just turns into like 10% bonus damage because of shock and burn, but any primers applied by companions or bonus affliction types as well will boost us even further. From here, you should be level 30, so we pick our first branching path in Spellblade, and we're going with the right side here. This gives us a new combo that can send the orb out in a circle around you, which is neat, but the main gains from this come from the further nodes. And to even Kiss for 1 bonus maximum shocked and burning stack, which is quite a big bonus for 1 node, Electrical Burns, which makes burning apply shock and vice versa, and then finally Shocking Tactician. This causes an extra burst of electric damage around any enemy that hits maximum shock stacks. We build lots of stacks on enemies, so this gives us lots of damage. Honestly, our main damage is very heavily single target focused, but we just get so many bonuses from passive effects like this one that branch it out into being more than enough for general group damage as well. As for your equipment, anything that boosts strike abilities is great, same for duration abilities, as Tempest is a massive source of our damage. Outside of that, you pretty much just want as many things as possible to boost mana generation. If you can generate enough mana, you can even swap out to using Davrin as a companion, who has guaranteed knockdowns as one of his abilities for even more guaranteed lightning crits. If you do try this though and feel like you aren't generating enough mana yet, then I'd instead just recommend using 2 time slow companions like I mentioned in the warrior section, building them up to give you free ability casts and bonus mana generation. Aside from that, you want a lightning orb and lightning staff, as we mentioned earlier, to boost our general damage, and always remember that casting Flame Wall before Tempest increases the damage of the entire duration of that ability. Then third is potentially my favorite actual playstyle between the 3 builds, just the way that it feels to have in your hands, and it's Rogue, specifically Duelist Rogue, the most melee version of this class. This has a lot of specialties to it. One of them is Adrenaline, which gives you bonus damage for getting enough hits on enemies without taking damage, and then just an absurdly strong ability itself that does like 16 hits in a row without stopping, which synergizes extremely well with some other various parts of the kit. We still play around afflictions a fair bit like we did in the starter Rogue build. We get some bleed, we get some shock, we get a bunch of necrosis, but while these are all ticking away, this build just manages to get a ridiculous amount of straight up weapon damage in too. It uses that to build momentum faster so you can use your powerful abilities even more often, and it gives you various bonuses for getting perfect defense or dodges, and then we have some bonus survivability too from this, even though the main premise of this is to avoid being hit to begin with, mostly because abilities have iframes when you use them that make you unable to take damage, so if you can launch off abilities frequently enough, you can essentially use them to dodge attacks and become invulnerable while they're active, while still doing high amounts of damage because you're using abilities. That said, your faction choice choice for this one if you want to min-max it. It's either Veil Jumpers if you want to lean into the direct damage of the weapons with the crits, Shadow Dragons for more momentum generation, which would be my personal choice and main recommendations for reasons I've already explained, or Mourn Watch if you prefer to stack the afflictions higher and let damage over time do the job while you sit back a little bit more. Moving on then to the skill tree itself, we start with Riposte for a strong attack follow-up to perfect defend, Powerful Rebuttal for precision gained after a defend, Pilfer for our first new ability. This is a cooldown based ability, so it does not compete with our actual momentum spenders, and it also applies bleeding and heals you after use if it hits an enemy, which is just an invaluable bonus for an ability. We grab Spellblade for a bonus maximum bleeding stack, which is nice, then Blood Poisoning, which makes perfect defends apply 2 stacks of the bleeding effect to an enemy, even if it is a projectile that you defend against. We take Leaping Shot to let us grab necessary shots, which then lets us pick up Swift Rebuke for momentum on perfect dodge or defend, as well as Burst of Speed for bonus momentum generation. Then we can go right into Lightning Flask, our second ability. This gives us a 50 momentum cost ability that does relatively high damage, pulsing around the player for a few seconds after activation, and applying the Shocked Affliction to nearby enemies as well. So now we have a cooldown ability and a duration ability, both of which applying separate afflictions. This leaves a lot of space for an effective spender to sort of fill our third slot, which is our next main goal. We then pick up Determination for 50 bonus maximum momentum, Overwhelming Tactics to make charged light attacks apply bleed, and charged heavies apply necrosis if we are at 100 momentum or over. After that, we grab Arcane Defiance for some resistances, and to Toxic Dash for our third skill. This will be your main spender until we unlock our specialization, and it also applies necrosis quite easily too. We then grab some more bonuses, as you shouldn't be level 20 quite yet, Insidious Rot for 1 bonus maximum necrosis stack, and then Noxious Presence, which makes control abilities also apply necrosis on hit. We pick up Wrath for bonus crit damage into both major passives here, Assassination, which makes strike abilities be guaranteed critical hits against low health enemies, so any enemy under 30% health, and then Battlefield Awareness to force control abilities to be critical hits against knocked down enemies. Our main spender in our specialization is both a strike and control ability, so this gives us lots of methods to get guaranteed crits for this. At this point, we pick up Rolling Momentum for 25 momentum gained on tool ability use, then we wrap back over to pick up Adrenaline, which gives you a constant damage and staggered boost if you can do damage 10 times without taking any damage yourself. This is a very big part of the specialization, which we are of course going to be grabbing here, Duelist. We take the ultimate skill, which is quite powerful in itself, and this then lets us grab 1,000 cuts. This replaces Toxic Dash on your ability bar, so your ideal 3 for this is Pilfer, Lightning Flask, and then 1,000 cuts is your main sort of momentum spender. This does a buttload of damage as an ability, especially because we have a couple of ways to make it do guaranteed crits and boost that even further. We grab Death's Blessing for bonus necrotic damage in general, and then Poisoned Blades to make strike abilities apply necrosis for each unique primer on the target too. We then grab Concentration for increased charge attack damage, mostly just applying to our precision stack usage, as we mostly just use precision on our charged heavy attacks. Then we grab Quick Control for permanent defense reduction on enemies that are hit by control abilities, and this one they'll probably have a couple more points to spend before 30, so then we go back to the main web and we pick up Perseverance for deflect whenever you do a perfect dodge or perfect defend when at low health, Tipped Arrowheads for 2 bonus maximum arrows, mostly for some motivation, which increases all damage done depending on how many maximum arrows that you have. This adds up to being a pretty hefty damage boost even if you aren't building around the bow. Now we head back to Duelist and grab Mountain Thrill. This makes the Adrenaline effect stack up to 3 times, which gives you significant potential for damage and stagger application if you can manage to do that. Then we take Adrenaline Rush, which reduces the number of hits required to activate this effect. Energy Burst, which gives you momentum and health whenever you activate Adrenaline, and then importantly, Deflection. This makes it so if you take damage with multiple Adrenaline charges on, you only lose one of them instead of all 3, and you take 40% less damage just in general if you have Adrenaline to begin with. Basically, from here it is actually pretty simple. We use Pilfer either on cooldown for damage, or if you want to heal with it, you can save it for when you're hurt. We try to keep Lightning Flask at 100% uptime because it's a duration ability that just passively applies damage consistently, as well as Affliction stacks as a bonus. Then we spend any excess momentum that we generate on 1,000 cuts for absolutely massive amounts of burst damage. You want to perfect defend anything that you physically can, both for maintaining Adrenaline, of course, and for spreading bleed stacks around and gaining the precision buff for guaranteed crits, which we generally tend to spend on charged heavies. Then for your companions, you either want double time slow companions with these skill points that I keep mentioning that give you free ability casts and bonus resource when the ability ends, or if you find you have enough momentum generation, you can then swap to only having 1 time slow companion combined with your second one being Davrin for the guaranteed knockdown crits like we talked about earlier with the Mage. As for equipment on Rogue, you want to boost strike or control abilities, you want bonus penetration to get past defense, charged attack damage is solid as that's how we get our crits, and outside of that, you just want to maximize ability damage even at the cost of defense by using super light armor. Our main goal as a duelist rogue is to never take damage in the first place, and we have free heals from our potion steal ability anyways, so you want to just go in all in on damage when playing in this style without a doubt. As for the question of how to quickly build adrenaline at the start of combat, if you want to know, the best way that I've found to do this is to use time slow right at the beginning, and then just get to work slashing enemies up during the sort of stasis period. It gives you a lot of free hits, and that helps you get adrenaline very early. That just about does it then, everyone. 3 powerful builds, 1 for each class, each one built for right around level 30 to carry you through to the mid-section of the game with grace and just high levels of power fantasy, letting you turn everything around you into mush instantly. I hope you all enjoyed this then, and hopefully you enjoy playing the builds in-game too. Of course, one of the main goals was to make builds that are powerful for this stage of the game, but then I also wanted to make them be fun to play too, so I hope you have fun while using them. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.